Hey guys, welcome in. Working on my technology. You know how much I just love technology. So welcome in. Today's Wealth and Wellness Wednesday. We got a tremendous response from last week's message concerning domestic violence. And for those of you who know me, that's just a huge, that's hard work for me. That's hard work for me. I believe that survival is a responsibility. So because I was able to come through my own personal experience with domestic violence and have a testimony and a voice and a platform, I feel it's my duty and my honor to be able to share and hopefully impart maybe a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of inspiration, some empowerment to those who are also going through that experience, because it's very traumatic for everyone involved. So welcome in for today's Wealth and Wellness Wednesday. Kind of on the heels of that topic today, we're talking about emotional and financial recovery after loss. So the loss could be from a death, it could be from divorce, or it could be from domestic violence. But we're going to talk about loss and what that recovery process look like. What do you have to go through? What experience does that? What does that experience look like? So for those of you who know me or don't know me, whatever, Marcy Batiste, I'm your ultimate power coach, helping you get your mind and your money right. And today, Wealth and Wellness Wednesday, sometimes we talk about the money and sometimes we talk about the mindset, but the two things have to be married together in order to achieve success, whether it's in your life, your relationships, or in your business endeavors. So it's very important. It's in very important conversations that we have. And I usually take Wealth and Wellness Wednesday, sort of my opportunity to sort of check in, get some feedback. What's going on, Lisa? Hey, thanks for joining in, love. So Wealth and Wellness Wednesdays are, I really enjoy. I enjoy being back on and connecting with you guys. So for those of you, as you're coming in, welcome in. If you want to drop a note in the chat about where you're chiming in from, that would be super dope. I know my mentor does that all the time, and it's always fun to see where people are coming in from. So if you wouldn't mind, drop that in, share the video out. Hopefully I will say something in today's message that will inspire, will help somebody else through a process. Because what I know to be true, especially in these times, 2020 has been absolutely bananas for so many of us. So many crazy things going on. This pandemic is like hopefully a once in a lifetime thing. Hopefully once we get on the other side of this, we never have to go back. What's going on, Doug? Thanks for joining in. Hopefully we never have to go back to it, but it has been crazy. It's been a tumultuous time. It's been a trying time. And so, loving on each other and supporting one another. And that's truly Wealth and Wellness Wednesday. That's what it's all about, is my opportunity to kind of love on you guys a little bit. So, like I said, we're going to talk about the recovery process, recovering from a loss, death, divorce, domestic violence. And you may think those are three like totally different things. Mars, what are you talking about? How do those things fit together? What does that package look like? I'm going to share some stories with you guys, as I always do. I'm very transparent about my own experiences, my own struggles, whether it's from weight or domestic violence or whatever. So I'm going to share some personal stories with you guys in hopes that my transparency will resonate maybe with somebody else, and maybe something that you're going through, and it might give you a little bit of insight into that. As many of you know, I have 5 P's, principles for life, relationships, and business that I kind of go by. Be present, show up for yourself. Be patient with yourself. Change doesn't happen overnight. Be positioned. Make sure you have the right people and the right resources around you. Be persistent. Don't give up. Things didn't get messed up overnight, and they're not going to be fixed overnight, whether it's life, relationship, again, or business. These principles apply to everything. And the 5th P is a process. You've got to have processes in place. You've got to have some things in order to be able to kind of follow a roadmap. And part of my coaching is about that road mapping. And one of the things we're going to start talking about in my Ultimate Power Credit group is life mapping. And what does life mapping look like? How do you do it? What is it? So if you're not part of that group, make sure you join into the group as well. But to kind of dive in, to today's message, a lot of people understand loss as it relates to death. They don't necessarily think of loss as it relates to divorce or in terms of domestic violence, because oftentimes divorce and domestic violence are actually seen, getting on the other side of those, coming out of them, are oftentimes seen as a good thing. And while in many cases it is, even if a divorce is your choice, and certainly getting out of a domestically abusive relationship is definitely a good thing, there's still a recovery process, right? There's a recovery process that you go through anytime you lose what is your kind of your normal. It's what you're used to. I used to call it the chaos that I was used to. But they have, as different as they are, they all have a few things in common. Number one, that change shifts you to it changes you to your core. Like everything in you and everything that you thought you knew about who you are, what you are, where your life was going, the direction you were headed, suddenly changes when something significant like death, a divorce, or domestic violence occurs. And so that's something that people don't often see, is that there is a lot of commonalities in that. Like you're forced to have a new vision for your life. I know particularly for women, a lot of times we say that we lose ourselves. I know my best friend, she's a second-time single coach, Coach G, and she talks about all the time how we leave ourselves at the altar, right? And when we do that, what we do is we put all of our eggs in somebody else's basket, so to speak. And so their vision for life becomes our vision. We take on someone else's vision. We take on someone else's dreams. And oftentimes we set our own life and our own passions and our own dreams aside in order to align with this other person and come together in this new relationship. You've also got to figure out in that light, then, what is my new normal? What does it look like? Where am I going? Who am I? I know for me personally, by the time I went through my divorce and I came out of my domestic violence relationship and a whole bunch of other toxic relationships, I literally didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what my favorite color was. I was just completely lost. And my divorce was my choice. Obviously, being a victim of domestic violence was not my choice, but certainly not returning to that relationship was very much my choice. And then I even think back to like when my grandmother passed away. I was, I think, 21 at the time. And she represented a foundation for me. That was the place that you could always go, and you knew you were making candy on Christmas, and you knew that there were just certain things that I counted on that foundation for. And so in her death, there was a loss there, right? And so learning how to process loss and grief and things like that. And that's the other thing that we overlook, is that there's grief attached to all of those things. We understand grief when it's related to death, right? That grief is acceptable per se. That grief is understandable. People are conditioned to be consoling to you in that time, but that's not necessarily the case as it relates to domestic violence and to divorce, because people have their own perspectives on it. And even when, like I said, even when divorce is your own choice and that's what you wanted, and sometimes it was a preservation tool for you, right? You had to get out of the relationship, you were suffocating, you were drowning, whatever the case may be. Even when it was your choice to leave, and it could be just a long-term relationship, it doesn't even have to be actually a divorce, but when you end something significant, a significant relationship ends, there's grief attached to it. And we overlook that so many times, and we don't give ourselves the time necessary or the permission necessary to grieve. For me, I've been divorced now for, 16 years, I think. And my divorce was my choice. It was very much my choice. But as a result of that, there came a lot of consequences, right? And even though, what's up, T? Even though I chose the divorce, there was no way that I could have predicted all of the things that came along with that, right? I really just wanted myself out of this situation, and I had been in it, I stayed in it for fear for probably 10 years after it really was over for me emotionally. Mentally, I was checked out of it. And so, but there were ramifications to that choice, right? There were ramifications to my kids. There was ramifications to my finances. There was ramifications to other friend relationships and other familial relationships. And sometimes we're not prepared for those losses, right? There's a cost associated with our choices, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise. And while it was the right thing for me, at the time, my kids might have argued that it wasn't the right thing for them. It wasn't the right time for them. And so there was a lot of resentment against me as a result of that. And I had to work through that process, and I had to allow not only myself to grieve and create a new normal and all of those things, but I also had to build that for my children. There were ramifications with mutual friends and things like that, where I had to, sometimes you can't recover those, right? I think friends feel like, and oftentimes family feels like, they got to pick sides. They can't just be friends with both of you after that's over. And the same thing happens with domestic violence, where people just kind of pick sides, like either I'm on her side or I'm on his side. Whichever side is right or whichever side is wrong. And sometimes the person that you love, in the case of domestic violence, that person is the person in the wrong. But do you not love them anymore because of what they did? Do you no longer talk to the person that they abused because of it? I know for me, with my domestic situation, I have a really, really, really dear friend of mine. And I met her through him. And when he did what he did, it was weird for me to tell her what he had done, because they had a history of a long-term friendship, 15 years plus, right? But when I finally did, she's angry, she's hurt because she's a woman, and so she felt my pain, she felt my my suffering, and she had compassion for that. But at the same time, he was her friend, and she had a hard time, I think, figuring out, where do my loyalties lie? How do I be still friends with this person that did this horrendous thing, because I still care about that person? And how do I support my other friend who's been there with me through a lot of trying and difficult times? Where do those pieces fit together? How does that all work? And what it amounted to, she and I actually sat down and we talked about it. And I said, this is what happened. I laid everything out for her, put all the cards on the table. This is what happened. This is how it happened. This is how I'm feeling. This is where I'm at in my process. And I gave her permission to still be friends with both of us. And it's, it can still sometimes be weird, years later. That was 8 years ago. But there's still that process that you go through. So much stuff comes with loss, and like I said, whether it's death, divorce, or domestic violence, people understand it when it's related to death. And so, but not so much in the terms of the other things. And so oftentimes, in the event of a divorce, particularly, I think when it's your choice, right? You're left feeling alone. You're left feeling disconnected. You're left feeling like hopeless, lost, sometimes resentful, sometimes angry. Some cases you're financially compromised. It depends, and every situation is different, but there's some commonalities that you go through, and part of that is that grief process, part of that is the healing process, part of that is the recovery process. And those strategies are very, very similar regardless of what created the space of the loss, right? I know, I I just remember, like, how do I right my ship when all I have left are broken pieces? You know, there was, in every single instance, I just felt lost, and I felt broken, and I felt alone, and I felt scared, and I had all of these things going through my mind. But people don't necessarily understand that, right? And so everyone has their own take on what they would do if they were in that situation, or what's the right way to handle it, or how you should handle it, that type of thing. But I'm here to tell you, there's not a right or wrong way to your recovery. There's not a right or wrong way to heal. Now, there are some strategies that you can use, which we're going to talk about today. But I want to, for instance, like, people will tell you, okay, moment of transparency here, right? So when I finished, so I never sought help after my divorce. I never went to counseling. I never did any of those things. So looking back now, I know that I never healed a lot of those spaces. And because I hadn't healed those spaces at that time, that caused me to make some of the decisions that I made in relationships after that point. So let's drop a pin there. But so after the domestic violence, the one thing I knew was I'm stuck. Like, I'm so stuck, and I don't know how to get right again. I don't know how. And so when I went to therapy, I remember sitting, I had been in therapy for a few months, and things were going pretty well. I was starting to feel better, that sort of thing. And it was probably maybe about 3 or 4 months after the incident. So we're talking, that happened in April. So July, August, maybe September sometime. And I had been going to therapy weekly. And, you know, therapists have these exercises that they walk you through and that sort of thing. But my specific therapist, we were talking about processing anger. And obviously that's one of the emotions that you feel after a loss. You feel angry, you feel betrayed, you know, all these types of things. And she said to me, well, she had me do this exercise where I wrote this letter basically to him. It's the whole write the letter, burn the letter, destroy it, whatever, but get the feelings out, right? Which I'm a writer, I'm a journaler. That's easy for me, no problem. What I had a problem with was when I wrote the letter and she read the letter, she said to me, well, you just don't seem angry enough. And I'm like, what the hell? What do you mean I don't seem angry enough? And she said, and I'll never forget this, she said, do you feel like you deserved it? Y'all, when I tell you I was pissed, I was furious. And I said to her, hell no, I don't feel like I deserved it. Nobody deserves to be held hostage and beaten in their home. Nobody deserves to be abused. No, hell no, I don't feel like I deserved it. What kind of question is that? And she said to me, and I'm not kidding you, she said, well, you just don't seem like you're angry enough. And I said, well, that happened several months ago. Like, you want me to still be angry? And I remember telling her at the time, I said, here's what I know to be true. I could still be stuck in anger. I could still be stuck in fear. I could still be stuck in a whole lot of negative, unhealthy, toxic emotions. But angry is not who I am. It's not who I am. So the other thing that I know to be true is that while I'm sitting here on your couch paying you X amount of dollars per hour, this joker's out there living his life, living his best life. He's still going to parties and dancing and doing all the things that he wants to do while I'm sitting here. And not only am I sitting here, but you want me to sit here and still be angry? Anger will hold me hostage. I can't heal if I stay stuck in anger. And I told her, I said, no disrespect, but this is our last session. And I gathered my things and I walked out and I never went back. I say all that to say, and I share that story to say that sometimes you still are going to have to advocate for yourself, because people are not going to necessarily understand your process and what's good for you and what makes you feel better, what makes you heal, and what makes you feel whole. Because her idea was that I should have stayed in anger longer. And I'm saying, no, I need to move through anger and begin to heal. And I can't heal if I'm stuck in anger. So I say all that to say that people mean well. I mean, she was my counselor, so I know she meant well. She didn't have any ill intentions for me. But the most well-meaning things, and people say them, and they don't really think how you're going to receive that in the middle of your healing process. And so, for instance, like in death, right? People say, oh, well, they're in a better place now. You'll see them again. They just tell me, well, your grandma's watching over you now. You're strong. You'll be fine. You're okay. You'll get through it, right? If you've been through a loss and somebody that you cared about passed away, I'm sure that they said one of, if not all of those things to you, right? Divorce. I remember hearing, again, you'll be fine. You're strong. You're probably better off. Yeah, he was never really right for you anyway. Flip side, she was never right for you anyway, because I know that's what his family told him about me. You can do better. You deserve better. Now, granted, my divorce was my choice, but I'm still affected by this, right? My ship has crashed because I took my vows seriously. And, I had feelings of failure and all kinds of other stuff associated with that. Domestic violence. Oh, you should have left him alone a long time ago. I knew he was wrong for you. I knew he wasn't shit. You'll be fine. You're strong. You'll be fine. You're okay. You're better off. All of those things. And people say them with the best of intentions, guys. They mean well. I promise you they mean well. But depending on where you are in your recovery process, let's take you're strong, for instance. I'm a big one on what do words mean, right? So you're strong has the basic definition of it is the ability to withstand great force or pressure, right? Okay, so yeah, I'm strong. But guess what? People forget to check on their strong friends. How many of you are that go-to person in your families or in your friend circles, and people forget to check on you? Are you okay? Like, they just assume, oh, you're strong, you'll be fine. But guess what? Sometimes when you're strong, it's because you have to be. You have no other choice. You have no other options. There are no alternatives. There is no plan B. There's no backup plan. You have to be strong because you're all you got, right? But it doesn't mean that sometimes as the strong person, we don't want the option to be vulnerable. Like I want to be able to submit sometimes. I want to be able to be weak and to be vulnerable and to allow somebody else to carry the burden of the strength. I don't always want to have to be that person. I don't want to have to always be strong. And certainly in the case of loss, that's not necessarily the time that I want to be strong. I want support. I want compassion. And I want people to just let me be vulnerable. I want them to let me show weakness, and for me to show weakness to still be okay, right? Like there's not something wrong with me because I'm not being strong. I want you to check on me. I want you to make sure I'm good. I want you to make sure that I'm straight. But here's what happens. All the best intentions, ultimately, you're left feeling bankrupt. You're left feeling bankrupt. And there's different kinds of bankruptcy. So emotional bankruptcy, and then there's financial bankruptcy. That it's just a toll that it takes on you, right? So emotionally, you could find yourself feeling depressed. You could you could find yourself feeling very, very much alone because the friends that you had relied on maybe were friends that were part of a mutual association, and once that association ends, those friendships end, unbeknownst to you sometimes. So there's an emotional void that is there, that you're just like, how do I fill this? How do I fix this? How do I right my ship when all I have left are broken pieces and remnants? Same thing financially. Somebody's taking away from you through death, or you get a divorce, or you leave an abusive situation. There are financial ramifications that oftentimes we're not prepared for. And sometimes we know that there's going to be these ramifications, but we don't have a plan. So we don't really know, like, how do I fix it now? Is it, where do I get the tools to be able to make this right again, to make this whole again? And you're left sometimes with a monetary bankruptcy, right? You're in financial ruins. I'll tell you, for my divorce, I mean, I made great money, 6 figures. The divorce was my choice. I knew that I could take care of myself. I knew I could take care of my kids. I knew financially I was going to be fine. I didn't really feel like I had a financial concern. But I didn't take into account the fact that he wasn't in the same financial boat as I was, and our assets were combined, our liabilities were combined. So bills that were his were ours. And so when I take my income away, he's left with the responsibility for it. And guess what? He couldn't afford it. He couldn't afford his share. He couldn't afford his half. So he decided for what was best for him was to file bankruptcy. Well, guess what that meant? If he filed bankruptcy because they were joint debts, that meant that I either had to pay 100% of all of the obligations, or I had to file bankruptcy. And the bulk of the debt of credit cards, vehicles, that sort of thing was on his side because he was the name brand person. I was the minimalist, the not material person. So I had very little debt, but I didn't want to assume full responsibility for his. And so I had to file bankruptcy. That rocked my ship. Right? I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't know what that was going to look like. So what I want to share with you guys today are just a few strategies that I think will be helpful if you find a way to incorporate them into your recovery process. And again, we're talking about after a death, after divorce, or after domestic violence, anytime you're forced to create yourself a new normal. So ending any significant relationships. And sometimes, guys, it can be friendships, platonic friendships. I mean, that can be some of the worst hurt in the world, is when someone you thought was like your best friend and your confidant and who knows all your secrets, when that person betrays you, or when that person is taken from you or is gone. So it's not just intimate relationships or family relationships. It can very much be friendships as well. But so one of the things, like I said before, that I didn't do after my divorce was I didn't ask for help. I didn't ask for help. I didn't feel like I really needed it. I'm like, it was my choice. Like, I'm about to go live my best life, all this kind of stuff. But there were ramifications with my children and with other family relationships that I needed help to probably repair some stuff in me, and by extension then make those relationships a little bit more productive. And I didn't do that. So one of the things, as the strong people, right, that go-to person, the strong woman, the strong man in the family, we think that we can't ask for help because we're not used to people offering it. But here's what I'm going to tell you about asking for help. It takes a great amount of courage to ask for help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what it's there for. Sometimes after those things, we don't know where to go. And what I'm going to tell you is there's not a right way or a wrong way to recover and to heal. And it's also going to be a multi-pronged approach. You can't just say, let me throw one dart at my problem and it's going to fix everything that's surrounded to it. It just don't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't. And so you have to take a multi-pronged approach to your recovery after a loss. One of the things that I find incredibly useful are support groups. And I know a lot of people think, oh, that sounds so lame, and I don't want to sit in no circle, and oh, this is my name and this is my problem, and yada 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 yada. And guess what? Those people in that circle have been in your shoes. They're going through what you're going through. Those feelings of loss and those feelings of loneliness, those people understand that. Those are the people in those support groups that don't care that you're the strong person. They don't care that you're the go-to person. They don't care that you're the person that made the most money. They don't care. They don't care about any of that. All they care is everybody in this room, sitting in this circle, around this table, whatever the case may be, we're all going through the same thing. Might be for different reasons, but we're all going through it. So don't underestimate support groups, guys. That was, gosh, if I tell you one thing that saved my soul after domestic violence, was sitting in my DV support group. And I heard women's stories that, if for nothing else, if I didn't get nothing else out of it, what I got was gratitude. Because I heard stories of horrendous assaults and abuses against other women. And it reminded me that as bad as things look for me right now, they could have been worse. They could have been so much worse. And I think that's where a lot of my survival is a responsibility. I have an honor to share and to be transparent and to help somebody else and to pull somebody else out to shine that light, is because that's what those women did for me in that support group. So if you can find a support group, I encourage you, whatever it is you're going through, and there's a support group for everything, guys. Everything, there's a support group for it. But those are the people that are going to understand, and they're not going to care that you're the strong person, and they're going to let you be vulnerable, and they're going to let you express weakness without holding it against you. The other thing is grief counselors. Grief counselors are skilled at managing the grief process. And sometimes we think, oh, I don't need a therapist, but a grief counselor and a therapist aren't necessarily the same thing, because there's a specialty as it relates to processing and managing the journey through grief, right? And there's certain steps that you have to go through. I talk about it in Surviving the Rain to Find the Rainbow as part of the recovery guide, is what that grief process and that grief recovery journey looks like. So don't underestimate the value of a grief counselor. Life coaches, right? I'm a life coach. That's heart work. Nobody goes into, I used to tell clients all the time, like, nobody would do this who doesn't care about you. And I may not know you until you become a client, but the moment you're my client, you're a priority for me. And I think sometimes after losses, we don't feel like we're anybody's priority anymore. Everybody's busy doing their own things as it relates to what has transpired, and you kind of get lost in the shuffle. And so a life coach is going to be that person that helps you develop strategies. So, like I said, it's a multi-pronged approach. There's not just one thing. You need various components, and pick and choose which ones are going to work for you. But as for me, anyway, as a life coach, as a wealth and wellness coach, it's about developing strategies, right? Because there's processes that you go through, and I talk about that one of the 5 P's is to have a process. That's what your life coach does for you. They help you create those strategies. And then finally, just to kind of wrap this up, guys, be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace. You hear me say that a lot, but that's a piece that I personally missed out on for many, 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 many years, was being able to give myself the same level of grace that I extend to other people. I have a great deal of compassion and a great deal of forgiveness in me and in my spirit. And like I said, I don't sit in anger. I don't stay angry. I can move through that process, and I can even love somebody after it's all said and done. I can still have love for that person. I may not fool with them ever again, And in some cases, I can even reconcile the relationship to the point where there can be, innocent exchanges, but it's different, right? And it depends on the situation. Abuser? No. But do I hate him? Am I stuck in anger? No. I've talked to him since then. I still have love for him in many ways. But that's what part of that healing process looks like, is to get yourself to a place where you're not stuck in hate, you're not stuck in anger, you're not stuck in resentment, that you're truly able to move. And you need strategies and processes in place to do that. So give yourself grace. The other thing I will tell you, separate yourself from your saboteurs. Okay? There are going to be people, and I know when I say this, there's going to be somebody that comes to mind. That person that always got something slick to say, that person that always has something negative to say. Separate yourself from your saboteurs, because they're not interested in your healing. They're interested in your pain. Let me say that again. They're not interested in your healing. They're interested in your pain. And not because they hate you or whatever, but there are some people that thrive off of negativity. You hear the saying all the time, misery loves company. There are just miserable freaking people in the world that, if all of a sudden you had this successful relationship and you had this happy marriage, and all of a sudden shit comes crashing down and your husband's cheated on you, or your wife stepping out on you, or whatever the case may be, your world comes crashing down. Guess what? They still want to be your friend. They still going to be in your face. But guess what? They're invested in your pain. They're not invested in your power. And healing is about finding your power after the pain. So disconnect from people who are only interested in your pain. And then one of the last things, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm over time today. Seize the opportunity to become. Seize the opportunity to become. When I got divorced, 3 years after I got divorced, I moved to Arizona. And when I got to Arizona, my mindset going there was, I can become anything. I can become somebody I've never been before. Nobody knows me here. And I truly viewed that as a fresh start. I disconnected from all the family. I disconnected, negative family wise. I disconnected from a whole lot of bad energy. I disconnected from a whole lot of bad memories when I left home. And when I got to Arizona, that truly was my mindset. I can become. And I seized that opportunity to become. And had I not made that choice, and had I not taken that opportunity that was presented to me, had I continued to operate in anger, had I continued to operate in my fears, I would have stayed in Des Moines. If I would have only been concerned with what's everybody else going to think, because there was a whole lot of people that told me I was like batshit crazy. Like, you can't do this and you can't do that. I did. And guess what? I didn't die. I started a bank. I've written 9 books. I became a public speaker. I gained a confidence that I never had. I lost 50 pounds. Like, I seized the opportunity to become whatever I wanted to be. And you guys have heard me say before, sometimes you got to change the name, right? Like, Mars came when I was in Arizona. That's where that nickname came from. It came from my time in Arizona, and it stuck. Seize the opportunity to become. Take that time in your recovery process to shed those old ideals. Shed who everybody else told you that you could be, who they said you could be, and who they said you can't be. Shed all of that and become whatever you want to become, right? Find new loves, find new passions. I grew up in Iowa. I didn't know I liked to hike. I had no idea that nature would refill my soul and refill my cup the way that it does. After I moved to Arizona, I've been to so many other states. I've been to the ocean a number of times. I've been to Florida. I've been to, like, you name it. The ocean refills my cup. It lifts my spirit. It makes me happy. Nature makes me happy. Flowers make me happy. The mountains make me happy. Nature makes me happy. And had I not ever shed those old ideals, I never would have known that. I've learned about myself that my environment is important. That the people I have around me, the energy, like I didn't realize that I fed off of energy, right? Find new loves, find new passion, seize that opportunity to become. Pursue a dream, pursue a new goal, create a new goal, right? Gosh, I'm working on book number 10 right now. Who knew? Like, my childhood dream was to be a journalist and to be a writer. Like, I've always loved writing, but it never was in my mind whatsoever that I had the ability to write a book, let alone to write 10 books. I never, I used to couldn't speak in public to save my life. But I seized the opportunity in a new environment. I shed the old ideals and I became something different. I became somebody that I love to love on. I became somebody that I have patience with. I became pretty dope. Now, that's subjective, right? There's going to be some people that are going to be like, you really ain't all of that. But guess what? In my heart and my soul, I'm all that because I know what I used to be. So in summary, I just want to tell you guys that if you're recovering from loss, either financially or emotionally, get help, get support, find a coach, find a counselor, find a support group, and align yourself with people that are vested in your power, not people who are vested in your pain. Okay? So that's today's message. I hope I said something that will lift somebody's spirits, maybe open a door, give you a new idea, a new perspective, a new way to think about your situation. And if you see it in your heart, please share the video out. If you miss me live, make sure you catch the replay. If you miss the replay on Facebook, all of my videos are always uploaded to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Marcy Batiste. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. All right. So I'll see you guys next week for next week's Wealth and Wellness Wednesday. Take care and we'll talk soon.